out of her presentation, and it's also on the S drive. So welcome to committee, and if you want to try and stay within like 20 minutes, great. If you go a little bit over, that is okay.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Rebecca Gerhart. I'm the Director of Permanency and Licensing at the Department for Children and Families. And I'm excited to be here to talk to you about the school year 24-25 foster care annual report card. Last year when I was here, we talked a lot about a convening that we held with our education partners about mandated reporting, and really working through some ways in which we could do that cooperation and that collaboration better. This year, in the same spirit, you'll see in the testimony that we spent a lot of time holding some meetings with our education partners, both our statewide education partners as well as our local education partners, discussing the best interest determination staffing under the Every Student Succeeds Act. That act supports young people in foster care in remaining in their school of origin as kind of the presumptive first option. Knowing that that can't always happen, then provides support for how do we organize transportation, how do we do all of the things that need to be done for that transfer, if a transfer needs to happen, and how can we utilize transportation supports and other supports within the school district to stay within that presumption and hopefully keep that young person in the school where they started. We know that that supports educational outcomes, as well as well-being outcomes, that kids do better when they can stay close to home, when they can keep their friends, when they can keep their community connections, continue to go to their sports teams, continue to go to their church, continue to go to the places that they know, even if they can't continue to reside in their family home for a period of time. Based on the success that we had in that convening, our partners at KSDE have set up some additional learning opportunities for our foster care points of contact. So those are the school district employees who are the points of contact, as well as our case management provider educational liaisons, so the staff within our case management agencies, so TFI, Ember Hope, St. Francis, KVC, or Cornerstones, depending on where you live in the state. They have staff who their job is to focus on that educational component. And so got all of those people together in a room and let them meet and talk about how do we best support these young people, first in staying where they started, staying in their school. And then from that, KSDE is hosting a number of opportunities kind of throughout the year. I think they had the first one about 2 weeks ago at the end of January to help continue to reinforce some of that learning for how we best support youth who are in foster care wherever they happen to land in a school district. And you'll see that there are some stories about some collaborations that we have had with local school districts that kind of focus in on some of the challenges that we have in the foster care system. So for one young person, 17 years old, few credits shy of graduation, experiencing placement instability, so they didn't really have a place yet. They were able to work with a local residential provider, finish up the few credits, and that young person is now looking at colleges, figuring out where they want to go for post-secondary education. Took them about 2 months. So that's a success story for that young person. In another part of the state, I think the theme for me in the second story is that when we learn to collaborate once, we learn to collaborate 2 times and 3 times, that collaboration and that learning that comes from it begets more collaboration and more ability to work together. For this young person, we had a sibling set who was able to stay in their school of origin. Because of the cooperation with the school district, they were able to access some after-school tutoring, access transportation services, so that they could stay at that school and the foster parent didn't need to pick up that extra transportation. The third story, I think, really focuses in on both the school and our case management provider really recognizing and understanding the young person's point of view. For this student, we found a relative placement. It was likely to require a change of school. The placement was in a different school district. So we did that. We did what we call a team decision-making meeting. And in that meeting, the young person was very forthright and said, you know what? I'll go live there, but I don't want to go to a different school. I like my school, but I'll go live there. So we were able to work with the school district and the case management provider to find a way for that young person to do both, to both reside in that relative placement that supports good outcomes in foster care, but also continue to be within that school of origin, which supports good educational outcomes.
Rebecca, could I stop you for a second? I just wanted to make sure, are you going through your oral testimony or are you going through the report? Are you going to do both?
I will do both.
Because if you're going to do both, I would just like to backtrack for a second and let Nick, we always kind of lead off with, I was thinking you were going through the report that we have handed out, and then we would open the testimony. So I apologize for not being clear on that. So I just want your testimony to count as testimony on opening a hearing and all the kind of the back end details. So can I pause you for a second and I'll let Nick explain the bill, and you can do your oral testimony and the report kind of in unison, if that's okay. Or you can jump in and do the report, not the oral testimony first. If you would like to jump into the report and just kind of walk us through that for a few minutes, and then we'll let you jump into your oral testimony again. I was trying to track with you, and it took me a second of what was happening. I just didn't want to interrupt you.
No, absolutely. I could move on to the data points within the report. I will say those stories are included within the foster care report card testimony, not the bill testimony for later.
Perfect. Okay, we're still on track then. Let's look at the report, and then we'll do oral testimony when we open the hearing. So thank you for that. Apologies.
So as we look at kind of the data points that are provided by KSDE, what we see is that in a lot of areas, young people in foster care are narrowing the gap. And when we look at this data, when I look at it, what I look at frequently is, compared to the all-student population, how are our kids who are experiencing foster care doing? And so we know over the past few years what that gap has been. And so I really look kind of year to year at what has happened with that gap. And we know that in a lot of areas, that gap has narrowed year after year after year. For our students in foster care, the graduation rate continues to rise. 2 school years ago, we were at 64.6%, and in school year, so 22-23, we were at 64.6% of students in foster care were graduating, and in 24-25, we are at 72%, so that's a pretty significant percentage increase. And also the gap between students who are experiencing foster care and the all-student population continues to narrow. In school year 22-23, that gap was 23.6%. And then in school year 24-25, that gap is at 19%. Is it still where we want to see? No, we want them to perform exactly the same as their all-student peers. But anytime we can get those numbers closer together, that is a success. The attendance rate has maintained relatively steady at about 89% over the past 3 years. And while that's lower than we would like and is lower than for the all-student population, we're within about 5%. Generally, the rates for chronic absenteeism for all students and the students experiencing the need for foster care has remained relatively steady, at about the gap being at about 17%. The dropout rate for students experiencing foster care continues to decrease, as does that gap. During the 22-23 school year, about 5% of students experiencing foster care discontinued their education without graduating. In 24-25 school year, that fell to 3.7%. What we know is when we look at the dropout rate for students who are experiencing foster care, that rate continues to climb, and the all-student population actually saw a slight decrease last year. So that gap continues to narrow and is down to about 2.5%. Kansas students experiencing foster care are experiencing greater success in being promoted to the next grade level, and that is true regardless of racial group. And we are seeing that gap at being, so during during 23-24, that gap was about 5%. During the 24-25 school year, that was about 2.4%, so about half. The gap dropped by about 50%. We also know, as we look at the data, that more Kansas students in foster care are being promoted to the next grade at every grade level, except for an anomaly with second graders. I don't have an explanation at this point as to why that one grade level seems to be different. And the gap continues to narrow for nearly all grade levels. There were a handful of grade levels, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th, where students in foster care actually experienced a higher rate of promotion to the next grade level than the all-student population. With the exception of 10th and 11th graders, even including that group of second graders, more than 90% of the students in any grade level are experiencing a promotion at the end of the year. For our 10th and 11th graders that are not at 90%, that gap, however, continues to narrow. Our 11th graders has that gap narrowed by 4.2%. And for our 10th graders, that gap narrowed by 2.7%. So it's getting smaller. One of the things that we also look at is how many of our students in foster care are utilizing at-risk preschool services and our mental health intervention teams. More than 90% of the preschool-age students in foster care are enrolled in an at-risk preschool program. For our mental health intervention teams that are available in about 81 school districts, these teams served about 8.5% of the foster care population compared to 0.8 of the all-student population. What we also saw is that for our students who are in foster care, there was increase in the percentage of students who are accessing that service, where the 0.8 stayed the same year to year for our all-student population. Our schools continue to focus on academic post-secondary success. So those kids who scored a 3 and a 4, we do see some wider gaps there, but we also know assessments capture kind of a point in time within a cohort, so we continue to watch that. Particularly, we note that it's most pronounced in math scores. I think the ongoing challenge, the thing that we know is probably the biggest difference between our all-school population and our foster care students is the amount of time that is spent in in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, or expulsion. Generally, across all of those, the theme is if you are a student in foster care, you are more likely to experience one of those things, and when you do, it's going to be for longer. We know that in our foster care population, generally, needs are going up, and I think that is reflected in that. DCF, through legislative support and a lot of things, has really done a lot of work on the front end so those kids who can safely stay at home do so. And so the kids who are coming into our system have higher needs. And I think that probably correlates directly to some of those negative disciplinary outcomes that we see affecting our students. I know we have some joint work groups with Department of Education to help focus on that, to help figure out how do we help avoid that, and if a student experiences an expulsion or an in-school suspension, how do we continue to support them, knowing that access to educational time in a school building also helps support placement stability. If a kid can go to school, foster parent whoever can go to work. And so we know those two things tie together, and we know that the behavioral, the higher acuity behaviors that we see also tie to some of the district's challenges in managing those behaviors in their classrooms. We look forward every year to kind of reviewing the information presented in the report, to reviewing how our students are doing compared to students in the all-student population. And this really gives us an opportunity to do some learning about what the data tells us about those educational outcomes. And I'm excited to stand here for, I think, the third year in a row and say, we're getting better. Are we there? No, the finish line hasn't been reached yet, but we are getting better every year. Those two populations are getting closer and closer together. And I am happy to stand for questions whenever you would like.
All right, committee, what questions do we have regarding the report? And maybe it's not in the report, so I'll lead us off, and it might be a little bit leading into a later. But what is the process like, and in a sense, who all has to be involved when a child needs to be transferred from one city to another or another community, and so there's a transfer happening? You know, does that have to go all the way up to the director on figuring out where the best placement is? Just maybe talk us through a transfer process for a student involving a school district, involving a family, but now needs a temporary placement to try and get to a permanent placement. Just maybe speak to that process.
Thank you, and I will do my very best because everything happens a little different depending on where you are in the state. So when we become aware, if the child is already in our custody, we'll start in that circumstance. We become aware that a placement is at risk of disruption or has disrupted, and we know that the child is going to move, we notify the school district's foster care point of contact, the case management provider, staff person, and at very least, the foster care point of contact at the school have what's called a best interest determination meeting. In that meeting, they talk about, one, where is this kid gonna go? Like, what is the next placement? Is there a way that we can support this young person in staying here, which is at their school of origin? What would we need to do to organize transportation? Each of our case management providers have what they call a placement team who make kind of the phone calls to the foster parents, the phone calls to the relatives and say, hey, kid needs a placement. Would you be willing to kind of cull down a list of where is this child going to go next? The placement decision itself is made by the case management provider. So they may say, kid's going to Aunt Susie's. Aunt Susie lives in the next town over. In that circumstance, it is very likely that that child can stay in their school of origin because transportation is not going to be so far. And so then we work with the district to either they take on the cost of that, we take on the cost of that, or we share the cost between us to make arrangements for that transportation so that that young person can stay at their school of origin. If Aunt Susie lives in Sherman County and child is in Wyandotte County, which are the two counties I can think of that are the farthest apart, then that child is probably going to experience a transition in school because we can't drive all the way across Kansas every day to get them to a school building. So then we're going to make arrangements with the sending school to send records, to get all of those things, and we're going to do the enrollment process in that new school.
Any other questions from the committee? I have one, but I wanted to flip back to, I think I'm on page 9 of the report, and I think I know in my head, but I don't want to assume, when we get to 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, the percent promoted, it gets in the, it's still decent, but could you speak to some of the challenges that DCF and the staff there are working around as far as that promotion being a little bit less, not a lot, but it's less during those years, and what are the hardships that students are facing that makes those years a little bit harder?
Thank you for the question. So I think when we look at 9th, the kind of those high school years, promotion is then based on the number of credit hours that they have. So I think the promotion question becomes a little different because we're talking about, do you have enough hours to be a sophomore, a junior, or a senior, as opposed to, did you complete the second grade curriculum? So I think challenges always include things like placement stability, whether or not they've passed classes. I think that is one of the places where we talk about, like, you do better in school if you get to school, so looking at that absenteeism number. And I think when we get into those high school years, I think it is true for all of our kids, even the ones in my house, they start to decide whether or not they're going to do that thing. And so I think that is also a challenge. What I don't know from the chart on page 9 is whether or not we see a similar drop for our all-student population. And I would have to look to my friends at KSDE, and I'm guessing they don't have that information with them.
So you'll see some of the drop. Some districts have different policies about grade placement at the high school. Some are, it's about, do you have this many credits? And if you have this many credits, you're a freshman, sophomore. Some don't. Some actually still continue to do basically social promotion on how they classify the student. But then you still have to have the right number of classes to graduate. So you would see a similar trend in the all students category, but it's going to be based on a difference in how the district decides to classify what each grade level at high school is. I mean, so some could say you could get to be a senior with no credits, but you're not going to graduate. Others would say, well, if you didn't receive any credits, you stayed as a ninth grader the whole time. I'll say that one of the differences with that is that based on graduation rates, when you get to high school, you are in a graduation cohort, and whether you so that cohort progresses whether you're getting credits or not. So that's why some districts go ahead and classify them and move them up, even if they're not getting credits, because you're responsible for a 4-year graduation rate. So it kind of helps you keep track of how much time you have left. So, but they do it differently.
Makes sense. Thank you for that. Any other questions regarding the report? You guys are just excited to get back on the floor. I can tell that's what it is in committee today. Well, with that, Rebecca, thank you for your report, and we will look it over and stay in contact with you. And with that, I'll let you sit down for just a moment, and we'll bring you back up in a minute. And then I would like to open up the hearing, and before I do that, the only bill that I would like to possibly work, depending on how long this hearing goes, would be the federal funding bill that we heard on Monday, and in discussion of amending in, and that's why I printed everybody what Dr. Harwood presented to us on 21, 22, 23, however many reports that they were sending, but you have a copy of that. But after the hearing, that we might look through those and make our recommendations and amend those into working the federal funding. And tomorrow would be the earliest time that the bill we heard yesterday would be taking any action on it. So just kind of where the amendments that are being proposed are still getting worked on for that one and brought, and they will be ready tomorrow. So just if you're in the audience thinking that might happen, just wanted to be clear that that will not today, but hopefully tomorrow those things will be ready. But the federal funding bill that we heard Monday, just depending on timing, we may look into that one. So with that, I would like to invite Nick to come up and talk us through House Bill 2320. And, you know, we had a privilege to give us a little history lesson, because we did hear this last year, and but talk us through what the piece of legislation is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Chairman. So, yes, committee, as the chairman said, this bill was heard last year. So most of you, this should kind of, you should recall some of the stuff that I will be discussing regarding this bill as I go through it. And I will make one note, since this is a bill that was drafted in 2025, there would be, if the plan of the committee is to go ahead and work the bill I would be suggesting a technical amendment to update statutory references in there to make sure we are amending the correct version of statutes. So we will need a technical amendment should the committee proceed with this bill. So committee, House Bill 2320, this would amend current law that is specific to authorizing the children in the custody of the Secretary for Children and Families to enroll and attend school in any school district of the state if it's in the child's best interest. The bill would also provide for the timely transfer of the child's educational records and kind of modify the duties under the statute as to how those transfers are to occur. Also, it would require that a child that's in the custody of the Secretary for Children and Families be authorized to attend the school of origin. And then if so, in certain circumstances, that a transportation plan, as you heard just a little bit ago, be developed for that child. And the plan kind of be a collaboration between various entities. So in the bill, sections 2 and 3 of the bill, this would amend current law relating to how a child or who can attend school in certain school districts. And generally, as I said, these legal changes would authorize a child in the custody of children and families to attend school in any school district of the state if it's determined by the Secretary of Children and Families to be in that child's best interest. The bill would also amend the open enrollment statutes. So currently in the open enrollment statutes, what is provided is that if a child that's in the custody of the Secretary for Children and Families, that child can attend school in a school district where if they're residing with a student in the same home as a student who is using the open enrollment to go to another school district, then that child can go and attend that same school district. The changes in this bill would open that up for a children that's in the custody of Secretary for Children and Families to be permitted to enroll in any school district of the state or remain in that child's school of origin. And also, as I said, for these transfers, when a child's placement is changed, generally the law says that school districts shall provide transportation to students who are residents of the school district, and that's in accordance with current law. And then under the open enrollment statutes, that a school district may provide transportation if they so choose to non-resident students, but a school district is generally not required to unless it's required pursuant to law. So what this bill would do is it would amend those transportation statutes, and it would provide that when the Secretary for Children and Families changes the placement of a child and they make that determination, the Secretary makes that determination that it's in the best interest of the child to remain in a school of origin. So like you heard, a child goes to placement changes, the determination's made to remain in the school of origin, that there shall be coordination on a transportation plan to get that child to and from their school of origin. This would be coordination for how the cost of that transportation should be provided and reimbursed between the Secretary, the school district, or it could be shared between both parties. And there's some consideration factors that would be considered for this collaborative effort between the school district and the Secretary for Children and Families. Lastly, this bill would relate to and changes law with relation to the duties for transferring of educational records of children that are in the custody of the Secretary. So generally, current law places that obligation and duty to transfer a child's educational records on the Secretary. So what this bill would do is it would still require a duty upon the Secretary to notify the school district that that child's placement is changed and notify both school districts that a records transfer is required. But then this bill would impose a duty upon the school districts that once they receive that notice, to then go ahead and transfer those records as soon as possible, but not later than 2 business days following receipt of the notice from the Secretary. So just that additional duty upon school districts to take that action as well. And this would be the same. It amends a statute in the Special Education for Exceptional Children Act. There's a very similar records transfer provision with regard to IEPs and records with regard to children who are receiving special education services. This would impose that same duty, that 2-day window for school districts to go ahead and transfer records upon a notification that those records need to be changed. And Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this bill, if it was were to be enacted, it would take effect upon publication in the statute book, which is July 1, 2026. And as I said, technical amendments would be necessary if we move forward with the bill. And I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just trying to remember, did we pass this out of committee last year? I feel like this was a good bill. Did it just not get worked on the floor?
My remembrance is we kind of got really hung up around the transportation portions and just didn't feel like we had time. It was kind of in a similar time frame last year to where the amendments were, felt like they were going to be too lengthy. So I tried to meet with parties over the summer, and there's been some discussion and wanted to bring it back up, see if we got any closer this year. But go ahead. Did you have another question?
Well, I'm just glad we're bringing it up again. I do think that the timeliness of getting these records is really important, and I look forward to whatever amendments you had. And I'm going to dig out my file from last year. My computer just died in my last committee, so I feel a little discombobulated, so thank you.
Oh, anybody who has an extra charger might hand it to Representative McDonald. I had one question on page 5 of the bill, line 20. So it strikes department and inserts secretary. Now, even in my understanding, the department then is assisting the secretary. So that differentiation, what does that mean? And that was kind of what I was asking earlier is, when there is a transfer, how far up the chain does this have to go and then get authority all the way from the secretary, or do those placement officers and those on the ground have authority to make that decision? They just have to report it. Anyway, speak to that change just a little bit.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. So my understanding of this is solely just a technical change to really kind of comport with the sync code. Because within that code, the statutes refer to obligations, duties of the Secretary for Children and Families. And I mean, the department, if that language is there, it's going to be the same. The Secretary is going to be doing the same things that she would otherwise be doing. But this is just to kind of comport with other statutory terminology that we use when we're referring to this specific agency.
Okay. Any other questions for Nick? All right. Yeah, Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Nick, this question might not be even appropriate, but how does this differ from the way it was under McKinney-Vento? Is that an answerable question, or is it clear off base?
So it shouldn't change anything with relation to homeless migrant populations, and
But once upon a time, pre-16, children in foster care or state custody were included, if memory serves me correct.
Okay, well, yeah, and that's a good question. Maybe I don't know the answer, the specific answer to that, but I will refer you on page 2 within this, the statutory change to 723122 there. You see on line, generally lines 23 through 36, what we're doing here under this law, and we made changes in regard to the open enrollment law a couple of years ago with McKinney-Vento in mind to make sure we are comporting with that federal law. But within that amendments on page 2, you see, I mean, for children that are in the custody of the secretary, I mean, these children, I mean, any child, if a child lives in the district, they get to attend there. If the child lives, resides, or is staying as a result of placement therein by a district court or the Secretary for Children and Families, that child gets to attend there. So that lives, resides, staying provides a very broad option for school attendance. And then also you see in that paragraph 3, this law would change it to, this would change it to say, if the Secretary for Children and Families determines it's in the best interest of the child, that's the school district where the child attends. And then in that paragraph 4 down there, you can see if the child is a homeless child, it's wherever that child resides or is staying at the time. So this is pretty open-ended to those specific populations of kids to where they will be allowed to attend school.
Hence the transportation. Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions, thank you for your presentation, Supervisor Meyer. And then we will open up proponent testimony, which I am showing 2. And Rebecca Gearhart, we'll just come back to you and allow you to tell us some of those stories you were telling us once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. As I was getting ready to testify today, I can certainly see where you landed in the exact confusion, because I was like, wait, these two things go together. The foster care report card and the successes and growth that we're seeing, and then House Bill 2320 really fit together in a way that supports taking the successes that we've seen and increasing those. Many of the things in this bill really are supportive of the cooperation and the collaboration that the Department for Education, DCF, our case management providers, our local school districts have already started building out. We already talk about those transportation costs as part of that best interest determination. We talk about where should this young person go to school, and really working from a starting point of kids need to stay in the school they started in, that the school of origin is the best place for them. And when that can't happen, how do we make sure that they then are timely enrolled in the school that they are going to in the future? So we're here today to stand in support of House Bill 2320 and really focus in on the ways in which the language in this bill first supports young people staying in their school of origin by codifying really things from the Every Student Succeeds Act into our Kansas statutes for transportation, for staying in a school of origin, even when you don't live in that catchment anymore. So we really appreciate that this really builds onto the things that we are already doing and the ways that we are already trying to work with our local school districts to keep kids where they started. But again, sometimes we know that that doesn't happen. And the next parts of this bill really support how do we then make sure that young people are timely enrolled in the next place if they have to go somewhere else. When I look at the language of this bill about things like transfer of records, it really seems to me that what it does is give the job to the person who can do the job best. We place children through the secretary. We make those decisions about where a placement will be. We make the notification, and then the school, as the holder of the records, moves the records. It really feels like it lines the job with the person whose job it is and where it makes the most sense. So it really assists with that efficient transfer of records. It creates a timeline that has not existed before so that those records are being transferred, and also has some language that makes sure that the records transfer doesn't stand in the way of a young person enrolling in that next school. So maybe the records didn't get there yet. Maybe we moved that kid faster than the records could fly. They can still enroll, the records will come afterwards. We know that when young people experience placement stability, that our case management providers do their best to enroll children as quickly as possible in that next school district. But we know that at times there are barriers, and sometimes those barriers are things like those records. We need those records to be able to enroll this young person, and this helps alleviate that concern. The other thing that we know is that when we can enroll a child in school, we're supporting placement stability. If I can call, or our case management providers can call a foster parent and say, here's what you need to know about this child, here's where they're gonna go to school, and they're gonna be enrolled tomorrow, could you be a placement? That's a very different question than this young person, could you take this young person and it's gonna take a week to get this young person in school. call my house and I'm going to say, but what's going to happen from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday? Well, school doesn't go from 8 to 5, 7 to 3. I think that's the hours, 7 to 3. Like, somebody's got to help with this. And so as kids can go to school, we can, better find those placements. Those placements are more stable because as parents, as adults who with children, we know that the school, while not a babysitter, is where they go during the day. And so being able to make that statement to a foster home and assure them that, yeah, records are not going to stand in the way. We're going to get that enrollment done. Kid's going to be able to get started in school quick. Will help with that placement transfer, and also for placements that maybe are at risk of disruption. Hey, like, the school is there as a support to you also, to help maintain this placement. What can we do knowing that for a few hours a day, maybe you're just gonna get a break, which I think is also part of it. So not only does being in school support those educational outcomes, support those well-being outcomes, that's where my friends are. That's where my social life is. That's where I see other people. So like, that's where I participate in activities, but also the outcome of being more stable in that placement, because the child is tied into a community at the school, tied into a community. I grew up in a small town. The school tied into everything. So as we can have more stable school enrollments and the ability to more quickly transfer, young people are more stable in their placements. As we discussed during the foster care report card testimony, that is a mouthful. Our kids in foster care are getting closer. They're doing, the gap is narrowing, and all of the things in this bill support opportunities for that gap to continue to narrow. We look forward to, we look forward to learning more from this committee about your views on this bill. We support the legislation as written and are happy to stand for questions.
All right, any questions for our conferee? Representative Schmoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Percentage-wise, how many kids get to stay in their school when you're determining best placement?
I don't have that information with me. I'm happy to look and see what we have. I know that some of that data is collected by DCF and some of that is collected by KSDE, and I know we're in the kind of the process of refining the documentation for outcomes of those best interest determinations. So I don't know how thorough it will be right now, but I will certainly check and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering how many kids the transfer of information would apply to, just, a rough estimate. Thank you.
Representative Estes.
Thank you. Could you describe for me a little bit how you guys handle when the school of origin isn't an appropriate placement because you might be worried about the case and somebody there at that school who would talk to that child about that case, or somebody at the school is involved in the case?
Sure, that's an excellent question. So the best interest determination, like I said, creates a presumption that young people should stay in their school of origin. But the second part of that question, or the second part of that decision, is if it is in their best interest. So as part of that best interest determination meeting, if those types of concerns existed, it might be completely appropriate for the outcome of that meeting to be, maybe this child isn't moving very far, but it doesn't make sense for them to remain in this school of origin. It really is a best interest determination that is the outcome of that meeting.
Thank you. My quick follow-up is, I'm not sure I have a crisp understanding of the timeline. So is there a chance that that child is sitting in the original school while that is being made, that decision is being made?
Thank you for the question. I'm trying to figure out kind of the best way to answer it, because I think I can't ever say there is no chance, because there's always a chance of almost everything in child welfare. I think what you are asking, and maybe I'm going to answer the wrong question. If so, please let me know. So if we have an investigation and there is a removal, whether that's by court order or by police protective custody, that initial order of custody lasts for 72 hours. and that young person would be in a temporary placement, it is possible during that 72 hours that they could be in their school of origin going to classes. It is also possible during that 72 hours that somebody has said, maybe this isn't a great idea. This child has just been removed from home. This child has, their negative experience was in a school building. It was, that somebody in that period of time would be like, maybe this kid just needs to miss school for a couple of days. So is it possible? Yes, but do I think that they are also evaluating those circumstances during that early period? Also, yes.
Thank you, because we do want to disrupt their lives. They've already been through something, so we want to minimize that disruption. But I do have concerns that someone who knows about what's going on, even another child or another adult in the building, can kind of try to influence what a child remembers, because the people there. And in my own mind, I struggle to say where's the right balance on this. So thank you for your answer.
Representative Brantley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony today. I'm just kind of curious, and I don't even know if you can answer this. So if a child is waiting for the placement, or maybe they're waiting for their documents to go to start school, how many of those kids are runaways? I mean, end up being a runaway during that time period?
So thank you for the question. I don't know that I can give you a super specific answer. I think there are times when, so we track our runaway numbers. We know how many kids are absent from custody. We track those daily. And I think there is a possibility that some of those young people were, between schools at the time they ran away from, engaged in those running behaviors. But I don't know that I could pinpoint that number with any accuracy.
Thank you.
I thought I hit the button. So there's a transfer happening. You've notified the school. What is so this bill calls for 2 business days. How close to that is current practice? Are you, and also is that through a portal, an email, or is that a hard copy mailed? What's some of the details of that process?
So I appreciate the question. I think the mechanism of transfer might be a better question for the Department for Education. I think they manage some of those questions. And the question about how long does that take, I believe Ms. Hedrick from Children's Alliance is going to be up here, and she may be better able to answer that on behalf of her member organizations.
I appreciate that. Seeing no other questions, thank you for being here today. It was great to have you. With that, we will have Crystal Hedrick from Children's Alliance, another proponent of the bill. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Crystal Hedrick. I serve as the CEO with the Children's Alliance of Kansas. We're an association representing the private nonprofit child welfare providers across the state. So I just want to take you back in time about 10 years or so ago, where we had a shift in the population of kids that was entering foster care. And with that shift became the high acuity level kids and youth that you heard DCF reference. Up until that point in child welfare providers to a fault had been really good at operating in silos. We created our own outpatient mental health teams for kids. We had nurse practitioners. We had school folks in residential settings. We really kind of managed those kids in a bubble. And it was really at that time, 2016, 2017, 2018, where we started saying, hold on, we need some help. And for, I think, one of the first times in my career, we started saying, these are our community's kids, and we need some help serving them. And we can't do this in a bubble anymore. And so that's really what has led us here. It was that same year in 2016 when McKinney-Vento shifted, and the ways in which we were serving kids in foster care who didn't have a long-term placement We lost that ability to keep them enrolled in school. As the acuity of these kids continues to rise, we have really struggled to keep them in long-term placements. We've reduced some of our numbers of residential facilities, and frankly, some of these kids just feel safer in those types of settings. And so when they've had an unsafe home environment, and we try to place them into a foster home that is structured and consistent and has a loving family, that feels really uncomfortable for them. And so we see a lot of placement disruption. I have some data that I actually just got a hold of last night, but it's really around the number of kids that we are struggling to place. And so far this state fiscal year, so essentially July through January of this last year, we've had 675 instances where we haven't been able to find a placement for a kid in foster care. These are primarily middle school and high school kids. And so what happens in those circumstances is we have really great foster families in our communities that will say, I can keep Johnny for one night. I can keep Johnny for 3 nights, but I might be at capacity. I might not be able to take them for longer than that. I might have another kid in my home that might be going to visit a different family or to go visit their biological family, so I have an open bed for a few days. And so we get in this kind of situation where we have kids moving around, and they lack complete stability. And we know that kids do better with stability. They need it, they crave it. For a lot of our kids, whether we want to admit it or not, schools are the bedrock of our communities, and we need help from our schools in creating stability and consistency for these kids. I think that there's some willingness to talk through some of the transportation issues that have been presented themselves between last year and this year, but ultimately we're just asking for help in giving kids stability throughout the day. Our foster parents are required to be gainfully employed. They have to have their own income so that they can provide for the kids placed in their home. They cannot do that if they have kids sitting in their home that need supervision. It is often unsafe for these kids to be left alone, unsupervised for long periods of time. And we simply can't have them not being educated in addition to the other challenges that they're facing. So this bill is a critical step towards eliminating some of these barriers and challenges to providing stabilization for these kids. And we would just ask for this committee's support in moving this forward. I'm happy to stand for questions.
All right, committee, what questions do we have for Crystal? Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's good to see my child welfare friends on the 5th floor. I was just looking at your testimony, and I had not looked ahead when I mentioned McKinney-Vento. But you said 675 incidents, and I just want to clarify that those are incidents, not children of lack of placement.
It's children that we have been unable to find placement for overnight.
So it's
675 times. Yeah.
Children.
Yes, in 6 months.
Okay. That's up. And then just kind of to address the Vice Chair's question earlier on the runaways. I wouldn't say they're all runaways, but it seems to me as if in child welfare, there's always about a 1% of kids missing. And in your testimony, it says September 30th, 2025, there were 5,523. Do you know if we're still around 55 kids missing or unaccounted for?
I'd have to
Correct
get back
my
with you on
terminology.
that, as far as how many kids are missing right now.
That might be a question for Rebecca. If you do have an answer to that, we would love for you to come back up and give an answer if you would like to, if you have that information.
I do have that information. If you'll give me just a second to search my phone, I can see what the number was yesterday. I get that report daily.
And if you would correct my terminology, I'm in a different committee with a different hat on.
So our number for, actually I have today's number. The total number of young people absent from a placement today is 32. Yesterday was 32, the 9th was 30. So we're at about 30 now as opposed to that 50 number.
Okay, thank you for that. Crystal, if you'd want to continue to stand for questions, if there are any. I guess it's more of an overarching question. So last year, I still feel like there's a sense of urgency around this, but it seemed like even last year there was even more. Over this last calendar year, have things improved and some more conversations have been had to where that enrollment in a district and the transfer of records, there's been some steps forward, and you feel like this bill would kind of solidify continuing to move in that direction, but maybe just speak from last year's urgency to now, it's still a priority. Have things gotten better or worse in a year?
Some of our providers have done a really great job addressing this challenge around not having long-term placements for some of our kids. So in child welfare right now, we're kind of trying to figure out some of our challenges in Sedgwick County and Wichita. There continue to have increasing numbers of kids entering foster care in Wichita. The rest of the state is trending down. We're trying to figure out what that piece is. That piece around placement instability is the same there. Most of these kids that we don't have long-term placements for are in Sedgwick County or based in Sedgwick County. I will say, though, in terms of a sense of urgency around this, last year, state fiscal year 25, for the entire year, there were 485 instances over 12 months where we couldn't place kids. So this year, we're at 675, only halfway through the year. So the need is there.
Thank you for those numbers and your testimony today. Representative Brantley, did I miss you? I'm seeing your name here, but was that from last time? Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate you being here today. With that, is there any other proponent testimony? That is who I have on the list, but just wanted to ask in the audience. Seeing none, we will move on to neutral testimony from Shannon Kimball from KASB.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Shannon Kimball with the Kansas Association of School Boards. I'm the Government Relations Specialist for the association. And for those of you who don't see me as often in committee, our association is a nonprofit membership organization for boards of education, special education interlocal boards, and the boards of trustees of community colleges and technical colleges across the state. We have a member-adopted legislative platform, and as it relates to this bill, the pieces of our platform that are relevant have to do with our language around strengthening collaboration among agencies in the legislature to support students in foster care or students who are experiencing homelessness, while at the same time, we have our language that you've heard us talk about frequently about unfunded mandates and being careful about shifting responsibilities to school districts without clear funding mechanisms or implementation guidance. So my purpose in appearing before you today is really to share, first of all, that we want to support these students and the partnerships that districts have with the agency to make sure that they find as much stability as possible in placement for these students. That's very important. Also, our school boards take compliance with the law seriously. And so anytime that we are reviewing proposed legislation, we're always looking for where are the pinch points going to be that we can share with you so that you can be aware of what maybe some of the things are that are going to be challenging for our school districts. So with that in mind, the things that we wanted to raise for you today really are around three areas that are in the proposed bill. The first being the records transfer timeline. It is rather aggressive. Wanted to just point out that there may be issues with being in compliance with that all the time, even when school districts are making good faith efforts to transfer records in a timely fashion. There are times when these placement changes happen and the schools are not in session, school staff may not be available who are responsible for the records, that sort of thing. So one of the questions that we posed to the committee in our written testimony is there any flexibility in the 2-day deadline that could be written in to ensure that we are being timely and we are supporting these students in the record transfer, but not unnecessarily punishing districts for good faith attempts to comply with the law in this area. The second would be around the transportation decision-making and funding piece that's in the bill. You know, I appreciate that it sounds like it codifies what is in practice already happening between districts and the agency, which is important. But again, anytime that we put it into statute, that becomes a compliance piece for school districts. And so we want to make sure that the guidelines around that and how the decision-making happens and who's responsible and where the funding comes from is a little more clear for districts if it's going to be in statute. So, you know, questions about is there dedicated funding in the DCF agency budget? I'm not as familiar with their budget. I don't know how this works, but I know in school district funding terms, we wouldn't necessarily be funded for the student under the circumstances. It's a little bit like the open enrollment statute, where we took care of that by saying if you're transferring on an open enrollment, the district that you're in is not paying for transportation, that's kind of on the parents. Well, that's not, that won't work in this case, right? So just wanting to get some clarity around that. And then finally, if there are disagreements between school districts and DCF about some of these issues, what is the mechanism that we would be expected to use to try to resolve those issues? So those were the issues we wanted to just point out, some questions that we had for the committee, and we appreciate the focus of this bill on supporting our most vulnerable students, and we stand ready to assist in any way that we can to make sure that this bill is good and supports the needs of our students and the agency and our districts all at the same time. And I'm happy to stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. And it looks like you do have some questions. First, Representative Estes.
Nick, does the bill say 2 days or 2 business days?
So it's section 1 of the bill with regard to the records transfer, and then there's a later section with regard to records transfers of special education students, and it is not later than 2 business days following the receipt of the notice.
Thank you.
So would there be kind of a 0 day when you receive it, and then 2 business days after that it has to be at the transfer location? Am I understanding that right?
So it just says that the record shall be transferred as soon as possible following receipt of that notice, but not later than 2 business days following such receipt. So I would probably start the count on the next day, and then you receive the notice, then you have 2 business days after that to get those records transferred under the current language.
Thank you for that clarification. Any follow-up?
Thank you, Ms. Kimball. I heard what you said, and I'm almost thinking that it makes sense to say if school is in session, because you do have school holidays where staff is not there. And I think the bill is intended to say, to kind of communicate that business days of the school, but at the same time, if there's sometimes children are removed over a holiday break or the spring break, and it's nice to have the materials there before. If you were to offer a solution that does have a sense of urgency, but takes into account when school is closed, what would that look like? And you don't have to answer me today if you'd like to get back with me on that.
If I may, Representative Estes, I would like to get some advice on a suggestion around that and get back to you. And I think you've hit upon the point. So for example, a business day in my district for Thanksgiving week, we are closed the whole week of Thanksgiving, but not every district is closed the whole week of Thanksgiving. So if the school calendar and the district offices being open, that can vary from district to district. And so that's really the reason for raising the concern, but we will get back to you, Representative Estes, Mr. Chair, on that issue.
That's a good question. Thank you for your feedback. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You just answered one of my primary issues right there. The second question I would have, would you be willing to work with the proponent who has brought this to us to make sure that as you discuss it might be fitting with what they want? Is that something you could do?
We would stand ready to be of assistance with this bill. It does some good things for our students and our kids in our schools, and so, yes.
Yeah, I would really like to see that because they've been very helpful in our Child Welfare Committee and really rely on them a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Brantley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it just kind of sparked a question in my mind that is the 2 business days stand for all year, but is there a way to have something when it's like a holiday that there's another plan in place so that student's not hanging around for, if it's Christmas, it could be 2 weeks?
I appreciate the question, Representative Brantley. I think that is the area where I need to follow up later on, if I may, if that's all right with you. Thank you.
Representative Poskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm assuming that school records are all digital now, and wondering if you would anticipate any problems district to district if they use different CRMs, for lack of a better, but if their electronic records are not all able to just be transferred that way. Do you know what I'm asking?
I do, and Representative Poskin, that is a great question, and I believe that not all districts are standardized in how they store their records, but I do hear Dr. Harwood whispering in my ear, so if I might. No?
I'm happy to, but I didn't say anything.
I do think that would be a concern. Not all records in all districts are digitized, would be my understanding, and not all records are stored in the same systems. I know a lot about the systems in my district. We use a particular system to store our special education records, for instance, but I'm not sure if what that means is you have to print them out and deliver paper copies if the districts are not using, or if it's,
that is
PDF and email, or,
right, that's the gist of my question.
Right, there's some logistics there that I am not able to speak to all the details of that would need to be considered. Thank you.
Representative Owsley.
Thank you, and I just wanted to draw the committee's attention to written-only testimony from our child advocate, Carrie Leonard, that's on the S drive, with some offered, example language dealing with the 2 business days.
With that, I would, Representative Schmoy, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When the department is looking at best placement, when we're talking about the highest of the high needs kids, how often are we looking at if they have to change districts, that you guys are scrambling trying to find a district that can handle those specific specialized needs, whether it's the staffing limitations, whether it's equipment and things like that? What does that look like on your side?
So our public school districts would be obligated to serve the student no matter what the needs are that are identified for that student. And then that would involve getting the records about the student's IEP, evaluating that IEP when it's received by the district, and then determining through that appropriate process how the district would then meet the needs of that student. So I think the short answer is the new district would meet that student's needs because that is the obligation of the district under our special ed laws.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Shannon, I think the next question is possibly for Dr. Harwood. So thank you for your testimony. And we're going to maybe ask Representative Estes has a question for Dr. Harwood.
I think he knew who this was coming from and what it's going to be, because it is the question about digital cume folders and where we are in the process of that.
Okay, so I've asked you not to call it that, because that sets up an expectation of a lot more than it's going to be able to do. So this goes back a little bit to Representative Poskin's questions. Every district has their own student information system. So there are several vendors that are more common, but districts select their own. So currently, the way the department receives data is they export the data, put it into a spreadsheet, and upload it. And so that's not, so it would be the same kind of way. They would have to print it out as a PDF and email it or some way, and then it would just be up there. The new system that we are in the process of piloting this year does have we call it, now we're calling it student lookup. So then a district could put in that student's information, and then basically you claim that student from the other district releases it. So some limitations right now is we currently don't collect course information. So it would not, and mostly for secondary and students, they wouldn't know what courses they're in. That's future enhancements where, because you have to map everybody. Everybody has to call their courses and code them the same way, which takes a while to do. So there would be limited ability to do that, just basic information. But the district wouldn't know at that time, like what courses they were already taking and what courses they were moving into. I think the other thing that is kind of comes up with that is that if a child shows up at 9 o'clock in the morning, regardless whether they're foster or not, it's uncommon that they would start school that day. Because even if it's a second grader, you may need to get a desk in the classroom and materials and those kinds of things. And so some of the concerns we've heard from districts are, especially in some of the harder to place students, is that they may not be there the next day and may not be there by the time the records get there. So those are the problems that I know are the problems for DCF and for districts that come up. And so it's still looking at trying to solve that problem of how can you get the records there as quickly as you can, but also then how does that, is the student still there when they get there? And those are the students that need the most help. I think that if you're going from one stable placement to another stable placement, I think that flows, a lot better. I think it's also if there's the opportunity for them to stay in their current building, then the school just goes on about their day. And and hopefully not even everybody knows that they're living in a different place. But it's certainly when you change districts, it gets more complicated. And if it's the shorter the time that they're there, it gets even more complicated. So it's a difficult thing. I know the school districts are trying to work with it, and work with the department and their providers to do that. And sounds like we're making progress, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Thank you, and thank you for the new name.
Student lookup. I like it. Okay. Seeing no other questions, I will close the hearing on HB 2320. Thank you all for your participation in that. And I would like to, I'm not going to basically take motions right now, but I would like to open up with our last 15 minutes here. Grab your reports and your memo from KSDE. Looks like that. Everybody should have one of what we went over from yesterday. And I just wanted to open up the conversation around, and I'm going to assign Representative Brantley to write down what are some of the reports that this committee feels like we could remove and have discussion around those different reports. Representative Estes.
The low-hanging fruit is item number 1 to delete.
So, and when we say number 1, those who don't have this report, we may just say, but this is the Early Retirement Incentives Program of Local School Districts, KSA 72-2291. We would, and right now, what I'm kind of aiming at doing is getting some recommendations to where I can ask for the right language for these to be ready Thursday or Friday, and we work this bill in that fashion. So other ones that as you look at this list, you think there would be a possibility of removing. Representative Owsley?
So I would say number 17, the special education district level excess costs it just adds confusion and isn't part of the formula and hasn't been seen in a few years neither.
So that one's a pretty new one. And we can just circle these for now as possible motions and discussion and action on these different deletions. So I have number 17 down as further discussion.
Mr. Chair?
Representative Smoy.
If I took my notes correctly, that every child can read is being collected by a different department, is that what you said?
Dr. Harwood.
The Every Child Can Read Act is data we collect. What I think, I would not suggest deleting that one. I think that there needs to be a better conversation with the legislature and the state board about, I'm not sure that the legislation is asking for the data that would actually be helpful. So I think that one needs to be evaluated. I don't think it needs to be eliminated.
Okay, thank you.
Evaluate. Representative Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned some stuff about the bond report.
So I would say that on the bond report, that was relevant 10 years ago when it started. I think now the problem with the report is it won't answer any questions that you have. The legislature would be better off, if you're going to have a discussion, is to ask for it's only going to be 1 year at a time. And it really would be better information with more there. And so I don't think that report is useful. The information may be needed when you're having the conversation, and we'd be happy to provide it at that time. We collect it, we have it for every year. I just don't think it has no context around it in the report.
May I ask a follow-up?
You may.
You just said something. We collect it. So do you still need to collect it? Because isn't the point of this to try to help decrease some of that?
So the difference is, so the state board is responsible for approving bond issues if there's more than 14% of their assessed evaluation, or if they receive state aid. So we do that every year, it goes along.
Yeah.
The other part is that we have to have the information if they receive capital interest state aid, otherwise we can't send it to them. So yes, we have to have it, just that putting together a report is not helpful. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just always in awe of Frank's brain and how he knows all these things. I would like to talk about number 20, the virtual math program. I don't really understand why we do this. What are your thoughts, Frank?
So the virtual math program report so the legislature, through a annual proviso every year, pays for IXL math. And so it's kind of like, since it makes some sense that the legislature would like a report on something that it specifically funds. What I would say is the way the report is worded, it's school-based, and it's pretty burdensome on schools. And I'm not sure that it's actually answering any of the questions that, one, I don't know who's looking at it and what questions they're asking, but I don't know that it's helpful in what it's doing. And it does take, because districts or schools have to do it twice a year, and I'm not sure that the time it takes schools is worth the value the legislature's getting from it.
While you're up there, would you talk about number 21? Sorry, Representative McDonald. I just looked down at my paper. You have a follow-up.
I do. I was just wondering if some of that data that we're trying to get to with the math program might be covered on number 16, the at-risk accountability program plan. I mean, wouldn't IXL be considered something we would spend that money on?
So some districts may include IXL math as an intervention in their at-risk accountability plan. So it would not be required. They could be focusing on something else in their at-risk accountability plans, or may be targeting another intervention at the time. So I'm sure there will be some data collected that way. The data that's collected in IXL math is how many students are using it, how many teachers receive training, and then whether they're using this this program or a different virtual math program. So I think a conversation about what information would the legislature really like to gain, and then we could start collecting that information. So
I feel like if in number 16, the at-risk accountability plan, we were a lot more specific in a good way. And so if IXL math was a part of their at-risk plan, those questions we're getting at would be in that number 16 report, if that were prioritized by the district.
Okay, now I will go, unless you have one more follow-up. You good? All right, thank you. The PAC Act, explain this one to me, because I'm reading, however the department would note that we have received requests for this information since the expiration of the annual report. Where is this one fitting into your chart?
This is actually no longer a required report. It had a sunset to it. Anytime the program is funded, we are required to collect the information but not provide the report. However, we always get a request for the information. So we do the report anyway, it's just for one person instead of, we don't send it to the legislature. But we do a lot of, we get a lot of requests from a lot of people on a lot of things that we provide the information for.
So do you think it could be deleted and you just still give that report to people who request it, but it not be in statute anymore?
So the statute says that if the program is funded, we have to collect that information. And so if we have the information and somebody asks for it, it's public record. We have to, we do that. It's just, we make it easier for legislators to request that just than everybody, because we just don't have time for all the requests we would get from everybody. So I don't know that there's anything to change there. What would happen is that if there's no appropriation, then we don't collect the data and there would be nothing to report.
The other ones that I'm looking at are pretty important. We got the apprenticeship, the ACT, the foster care. I'm just flipping through pages, but I think we have some to discuss and probably at least 2 or 3 to be able to delete, and we'll amend that into the federal funding report bill.
And if I could make one more suggestion.
One more
If you
suggestion.
don't mind. Number 2, so the reason that report will never be useful is that it only answers the question, what data elements were added this year? I don't think we'll ever get that question. We may get a question about what data elements do you collect? And we have that available, we could send that over. But this report is only what new data elements we have started to collect that year. And so if you were worried about one particular data element, this report would only be helpful if you asked it in the right year. Otherwise, if the legislature wants to talk about data that's collected, we can give a report about all the data that's collected.
Representative Estes.
I think, and you please correct me if I'm wrong, that is a time when legislators were concerned about student privacy and they wanted to see what was collected and if anything changed. Is that the right history on that?
And so, and again, that's what happens with a lot of these reports is we want this information and it gets used for some period of time. And this would have been around with the Kansas Student Data Privacy Act and those were going on. Makes a lot of sense. I would say that we don't have to have a law to provide you with data. And then, because when it's in a law, we keep doing it even if nobody looks at it anymore. But in this case, this report, again, the only question it will answer is what data elements were added this year.
Thank you.
Representative McDonald.
Good job. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we talk a little bit about number 7, legal services challenging constitutionality of school finance system? I know we're out from under the court's purview. In your opinion, what purpose would this serve at this point?
So it provides the legislature information about if districts are spending money on legal challenges to legislation. So, so that's the answer. I would say that's not necessarily as big of an issue right now because there's not currently a legal challenge going on. So I don't know if it's necessary now and it comes back up again later.
Is it just for legal challenges regarding school finance or legal charges because of anything we pass?
Specifically for legal services challenging the constitutionality of the school finance system. It is only for that purpose.
Okay.
Yeah, any other legal services, they don't report.
Okay, with that, I think I will close this portion of the discussion. Thank you, everyone, for your input. I took notes, and I will also rewatch that portion and talk with research and revisers. And if you have other things that you see, you can feel free contacting me about that. Oh, Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Point of privilege. I'd like to introduce from our State Board of Education and a former member of the state representative, Connie O'Brien is sitting out here and listening up, my neighbor.
Would you please stand? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great to have you today. Thank you, Representative Johnson. Okay, well, we got 30 minutes before we have to be back on the floor. Committee is adjourned.